2, 3, go. Welcome to Daring to Suck. I'm your host, Grace Askew, a veteran musician, songwriter, recording artist, and road dog who has been living and breathing my craft for over 15 years. Each episode will dive deep into what it truly looks like to be a working artist, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Come roll along with me, tumbleweeds. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know
You're very welcome.
you're busy, always creating something. So, and season 1 is all about just exploring the artist's journey, just artists of all walks of life, how they got to where they are now. And our guest this week, Mike Doughty, is certainly a working artist in every sense of the term. He is one of my personal music heroes, so it's an honor to have you, and I consider you a friend. So thank you for doing this.
It's true. Yeah, it's very true. We are friends.
Well, there are so many facets to your career. You've just done so many different things. I was a little overwhelmed in trying to figure out what to talk about, but the more I kind of dug into your story and all you've done, there's just, to me at least, there's like this common theme of, first of all, you're very resilient through all you've been through, and you have this reinvention throughout your career. You always reinvent, come up with new projects. So I thought, for our listeners who are kind of newer artists, that would be a really powerful thing for you to talk about in your own experience with just being resilient and reinventing yourself. And I noticed you grew up Army bases all over the country.
Yeah.
Do you think that part of that of your childhood kind of helped you become this kind of chameleon of sorts? Or
I mean, that's a good question. Because when my dad was in the Army, it was moving every 2 or 3 years, or sometimes every year. But not like I move now, which is to a new city every day.
Yeah.
Essentially, when I'm on the road.
Yeah.
But so my dad got a permanent position at West Point when I was like 11 or 12, which is like, there's only a couple places in the Army where they actually have permanent jobs, and he got one of them. And I just felt gypped. I was like, we're not going to move again. Like, I thought we were going to go to, I loved moving around. Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing is, I mean, if you go to school on post, every kid is doing the same thing. So you don't get that new kid vibe of like, who is this weirdo that just showed up in our class? You really, everybody's in the same boat. A third of the people are new. So it's not hard to make friends. Wasn't for me at any rate.
Yeah. So you think that just helped somewhat to a degree with just being comfortable with shifts in life and just everything?
I guess. I mean, I lived in New York for a very long time, 89 to 2015. So I always had a home base. I mean, there was a year where I lived in Florida, which was very weird.
I cannot see Mike in Florida. That's so funny.
It was weird. I was sort of drying out from a lot of partying.
Oh, okay.
Which it didn't take, but I stayed with a tour manager in Pensacola for like a year.
Yeah, you were talking about, so living in New York, I would think you have to just be comfortable with the constant shift of everything around you. I mean,
yeah, I mean, kind of much to my chagrin, I moved to the Lower East Side and, would have been happy to be there forever, but it just kept changing and people kept leaving. And, it's not just like finding yourself an apartment that is, rent stabilized, as like the businesses around you change. And it's got to be so that the neighborhood got so rich that there wasn't a laundromat in the neighborhood.
Oh my
because
God.
the couldn't afford to pay the rent on Ludlow Street.
Oh my
and
gosh.
it was just
Yeah.
And and I kept moving around, and I love New York. And I think anybody that says New York is dead, like, don't listen to them. There's plenty of New York left.
I would love to try living there. It's fascinating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's intense.
Yeah,
It is,
that's a good word. Yeah.
you know, and you got to live someplace affordable. So you're not living in the neighborhood that you are in love with, probably.
Yeah.
Even if you're living like in Ridgewood, Queens or something, like it's
Yeah.
changing so fast
Yeah.
that I'm sorry, I'm dog managing as I do this. Um there's
Oh,
no stability
yeah.
in of where I mean stability, like you don't move to New York for stability. So
True. True.
that's not the right word, but you know, like I wanted like my coffee shop and you know my
Yeah.
neighbors to be people I want to out with, and you
Yeah.
know, as that changes, it just got dispiriting. And the fact that like there's just something dispiriting about the fact that like I could never move back to the neighborhood I spent my teenage years running around in. You know,
Right. Yeah.
like I used to have a place on Elizabeth and Spring, which is now Nolita, which is like never in a million years am I going to be able to afford to live in Nolita. Like
Yeah.
never in a million years.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. Well, I don't know if you know this, but
Yeah.
you certainly shaped my a lot of my early kind of music direction because I discovered you when I was like probably 17, visiting my sister in Manhattan, and Dumbo was, it was still sketchy and like scary. I was visiting her friends, and they played your music, and you were like the cool, like all the cool underground, like in the know hipsters at the time. Hipster wasn't really a word yet, but they were listening to you. And I was just so fascinated by how unique your music was. And
Oh,
is there
thank you.
something, do you have a memory when you were younger? Like, do you have a vivid memory of your first interaction with an instrument or music in general?
Sure. I mean, I remember. So growing up in an army base, you're not likely to find the the stoner guitar player dude that can show
Yeah.
you how. So I started from scratch, and I started on bass because a bunch of friends of mine started a band, and I was the last person to join. So they were like, "You have to be the bass player." So I was like, "Fine." But I got bass, and there was a PBS show called Rock School.
Oh.
That Yeah, it was great. It was a BBC show, and it was like three like new wave British people like showing you
Oh
like, oh,
man.
this is how reggae, this is how the blues are, and this is what
Yeah.
funk is. And so I learned like little bits from Rock School, but mostly I just like banged on the low E string and just yelled my own lyrics, and
Uh,
it was wonderful.
how old
Wonderful.
would you
So
have
I
been at the time?
started out as,
Were you like
yeah,
16 or 17, or how old would you say?
yeah, 16.
Okay. Wow.
Six.
Do you have an artist that you remember? Because I feel like all of us mimic an artist before we find our own voice. I certainly mimicked like Cat Power. Was the first female I kind of resonated with. Can you name someone that you kind of mimicked before you found your sound?
Well, I guess I always wanted to be Paul Westerberg,
Okay.
and then be Tom Waits, and then I wanted to be from a tribe called Quest.
Nice.
And you
Dude, I
know,
totally get
and I
that.
think
That.
it's really like I'm sort of a synergy of all those things in terms of my style.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by the time I got to be actually good at what I was doing, which is like, you know, 91, and I'm 21 years old.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wasn't good, but I was like competent as a
Mm-hmm.
21-year-old. Whereas before that, barely good enough for punk rock.
I love it. And when was your first gig? Do you remember? Like
Well,
as you like doing your own thing?
I had a band called The Difference.
Ooh, I like that actually.
That is a new wave ass band name, right? 1986, and we played an art center called the Arc.
Okay.
Yeah, in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. I was at like a summer writing program there, And there was a guy who became my good friend, who was a drummer, who was like he was a black dude and had one of those black dude mullet fades that was a thing in the 80s.
So cool.
It was like a mohawk that came all the way here, and then he had like the little dreads coming out the back, and could play the Clash, could play U2 songs, and like a couple of Sex Pistol songs. And then there was like a metal guitar kid who could only go like billy, 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 billy. And he couldn't do chords, he couldn't do songs. He was just like billy, 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 billy. You know, that's all. And I'm like playing the E string,
banging on the E string, yeah.
I probably couldn't do 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 do. It was more like da 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 da. 18 years old.
Yeah. Did you all end up cutting demos or like releasing little rough cuts?
Oh no, I didn't. I don't think I released anything or recorded anything until I was in New York.
Okay.
And I recorded. By this time, I became an acoustic guy, and I recorded at Idle Music on East 10th Street. And I remember having no idea what was going on, like no idea where the mic went, and the guy being like, "Well, do you want this, that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I had no idea.
Tell me what to do."
And he had something like, he had recorded an Agnostic Front album, and he was like, the snare sound on that Agnostic Front album, everyone loves it. It's because of that brick wall right there. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Well, I don't know that I knew what a snare drum.
Right.
Hey, I hope y'all are enjoying the episode so far. Really quick before we continue, I see these episodes as a form of priceless mentorship, and that's something I always wished I had in my own journey. If you also feel you are getting something of value from these conversations from veteran working artists, there is a way to support the show and keep it going. For just $3 a month, you can become a personal patron to the podcast by joining over at patreon.com/GraceAskew. Or if you'd like to be a one-time supporter, you can name your price and throw in what you'd like to the virtual tip jar at paypal.me/GraceAskew. Either way, your listenership means so much to me. All right, let's get back to the show.
But you just leapt into it, and I feel like that's so you, like your personality, and maybe this was just developed over time, but you seem to have such a comfortability with just expression. And it seemed, did you grow up with parents that were really nurturing with that, or did they encourage you to express yourself? No.
Not at all. I mean, my dad was about as strict Army guy as you can get. Well, no, that's not exactly true. He was a strict Army guy.
Yeah.
And my mom was she was like a testing coordinator at a school. Gave out guys tests, which is like, that's all about the rules. Like, like standard is in the name. So yeah, they had no what I was trying to do with my life, like none.
So and you think it came out of rebellion?
I remember this. I mean, that's what they said. They kept being like, "Oh, you're rebelling. We understand you're rebelling." And I was like, I think this is just who I want to be.
Yeah.
Like, I think I just figured out.
Yeah.
So the minimum income you could live on in the late 80s was, I just remember the number, $17,000.
Okay.
Like, that was like the poverty line, $17,000, the late 80s. And I remember going to a fire hose show and at Maxwell's in Hoboken, New Jersey. And I was watching them, and I was like, I bet those guys make $17,000 a year. Like, I don't know if I could be a rock star, but I think I could play wells, and I think, drive around in a van, and I bet I could make $17,000 a year that way.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of, a sort of, just an epiphany of like, wow, I can live like a normal middle-class life and play music.
Yeah.
And that was a real moment for me.
That's so funny. I mean, you seem to have and I think a lot of our listeners who are just starting out with their own craft, and you've mentioned in interviews how you get into this trance state almost when you're rapping, and how much the practice of songwriting means to you. It shows with your Patreon page. You create a song a week. You've done that for how many years? Like,
It's been, God, it's been like 4 years. It's been a while.
okay,
There's 20 something songs.
that's
I
amazing.
counted them, the other day.
Yeah.
And I finished an album earlier this year and an EP earlier this year. And, because of the pandemic, I'm just at home writing all, like,
Yeah.
I write from like noon, and then I do some reading, and then I do some more writing. So I have like a major backlog of tunes.
Yeah, it's like a blue collar approach to writing that I've heard a lot of other writers put it that way who are professional and making money off of their songwriting. And you seem to also approach it that way. Is that kind of the case?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as a job that I'm grateful to have. Of course, like, I'm an artist, and so I have these moments of envy for, like, like, I got a friend with some Grammys.
Yeah.
I got some rich friends that are, like, superstar rock and roll guys.
Yeah.
And, I envy them to a certain degree, but ultimately, like, I get up and I do what I want to with my
Yes.
day.
Yes.
And I have this incredibly loyal and more importantly, interested fan base.
Yes. Absolutely. There's Seth Godin. Have you heard of Seth Godin? Just genius writer on marketing, but also it speaks a lot of what artists do. And he just talks all the time about be famous to the family. And that's what, instead of being this like diva superstar like Beyonce, like we want more humanism nowadays in our artists. And you've certainly found this like loyal tribe of followers who get the soul of what you're doing because you create every day, no matter what happens to you, you have that resilience and the momentum, that constant forward motion of just being this prolific artist. And I think that's way more of a legacy to leave behind. It's much more meaningful what you're doing than having a Grammy on the shelf. I don't know. That's just my perspective. I'm a little partial.
I would love to have both,
Right,
like actually pursuing a record deal and talking to some record companies, and I just like some of that promo money.
Yes.
Just to be able to, like, whatever that next level is. But the thing is like talking to them about my Patreon and
really,
being like really, like, sort of introducing the topic of, you have to let me have this Patreon, because for one thing, it allows you to go out on the road with a band without having to worry about like oh, I can't bring a drummer, I got to pay the mortgage.
Yes.
And for another, it's right now I'm really good. Like, I'm really good at this juncture in my life, and that's Patreon. That's the
amazing.
amount of writing I've done, the practice of writing, and it's like, if you want this guy who's really good, you have to let me do this thing.
Yeah.
So
that seemed to cause issues with
to get into that.
They like want control of that part of it as well, or?
Well, it's all the conversations have all suddenly gotten much slower because of the pandemic. Whereas before the pandemic, it was like, like, oh yeah, I think we're ready to do this, and and it was just sort of getting to the negotiating phase. But it's going to be problematic. There's no not, and I think I can talk them into accepting that, like, if you want the good version of me, let me do. And like, I don't have a problem, like, giving a record company my masters, depending on what I'm getting out of it in terms of investment from those guys. The thing is, I think I'm always gonna want to do this. I mean, knock on wood. But I think, like, when I'm 80 years old and my gnarled, barely sort of fret an open chord, so my deal is I want to just keep the Patreon audience.
Yeah.
Whenever, because it just, all record deals end. They all do.
Yes.
No matter how successful you are.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you're already geared up more than more artists to survive for the long haul, because you have that like muscle of reinvention kind of built into your wiring,
Yeah.
so you can kind of survive through things like a pandemic. You found your loyal tribe of like people who, no matter what direction you may go in, they get that it's you. So that's something that's so hard to come by.
Well, there's good and bad to it. If you reinvent yourself all the time, I mean, my entire career, somebody's come up to me after shows and gone, man, I really like that last thing you did a lot more. Like, why don't you do that thing that you did 3 years ago? And I remember the first time it happened is my friend Carson Kreitzer came to a soul when Soul Coughing was like really popping, and and I had been an acoustic guy, and I was just over the moon about how all this momentum was happening. And I was like, so what'd you think? And she was like, well, I liked it. Yeah, I guess I liked it, but I really liked that acoustic thing. And that's the first time it happened. And it's happened to me with every album I've ever done. And, that you have to be willing to face that if you want to do, if you want to reinvent yourself.
Do you see it as that, as reinventing yourself, or is it just like how do you approach it whenever you want to do a new project? Is it just like an extension of who you already are, or like is it a neat, like you're bored with your current sound?
Well, no, I think I just have a ground level view of it, and I just start working on the thing.
Yeah.
Like I have, much to my surprise, really started sounding like Soul Coughing again.
Really?
And a bunch of threads kind of made, yeah. If you listen to the Ghost of Room's my new band, with Andrew Scraplip. It really is very Soul Coughing, and it's because I got GarageBand on my phone. The only good bass sound's the upright bass sound. So suddenly I'm writing upright bass lines.
Yeah.
I started messing around with a sampler, so suddenly there's what I'm doing. And I started, like constantly a song a week is a lot of songs. I mean, I say that to you because you did like 700 songs every day in a row. It's
a very short amount of time.
I bow.
You've been doing this much longer than me, so.
But so I ended up working with breakbeats and that I just found on YouTube. Like the classic hip hop breakbeats, and those things came together, and suddenly it sounds like Soul Coughing again. Yeah. And it's not premeditated. It's just things happening.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I've been listening to it all last night. I think overall what fascinates me about you is just how prolific you continue to be. And I would love for you to come, what is some advice you would give to people who are struggling to even like get comfortable with their craft? I mean, write every day, because that's the advice I tend to give people. It's not glamorous. There's no glamour rock and roll advice for that,
I think you've got to have fun. I think that the most important thing is that whatever you're doing, it be the thing that you enjoy doing. When I meet people like, my age or younger, but people are like, hey man, I really want to like just learn how to play some guitar. I want to learn how to play a couple of songs. What guitar should I get? I always tell them, serious advice, not a joke. Buy a guitar you think is really beautiful. Go into the store and look at guitars. And if you're like, I like that silver sparkly one, that's what you get, because you're going to pick it up.
Yes.
Put it out on a stand in your room, look at it and be like, yeah, I want to play this silver sparkly thing.
So true.
So yeah, it's, I'm just trying to do what I enjoy. And if you do that, it's not hard work. I mean, like, I don't consider myself a hard worker because I enjoy it so much.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm so bad at every job I've ever had in my life that wasn't it. Just like really, really bad at it.
I feel you. I feel
Yeah.
you. Amazing. Well, did you see a difference since we're both sober artists? I can relate to kind of that shift of writing sober because I used to think that the whole persona of the tortured soul was what I needed and to order to be valid and a great artist. Did you lean on that same kind of ideal for a while and then shift over?
I did. Well, a couple things. For one thing, my receptors had completely burned out by the time I got sober, and they just weren't coming back. So whatever kind of juice I got from drugs and alcohol, it just wasn't coming back.
Mm,
So if I a, a good writer again, I had to start over. I did not have the option of keeping the drugs and alcohol around.
yeah.
Um, in terms of pain, I think that supply of pain is going to stay with you no matter what. Even if you become a happy person
Yeah.
in your life, you always have that on. You always have those experiences. And so, like, I don't know if I would have needed to become an artist if I didn't have traumatic experiences, bad experiences, whatever it was. If I didn't have depression and anxiety and all that stuff, I don't know if I would have done this. But that doesn't mean I have to live in it forever. It means I
Right.
have to be able to access what those feelings were and be able to write about them and understand them. As I get older, life gets kind of easier, and yet I can always go back to what that feeling was and examine that feeling. Um, it is a rich source.
Thank you so much for saying that because I sometimes question being sober, honestly, because I have so many things in my life empowering me. You know, I'm like married now, I've got a kid, I have to like be a mom. So it's like all these things that are very positive, but I feel like artists are kind of naturally born a little bit more tortured than most people. Would you agree with that? Like our souls are a little bit more, I don't know, we kind of seek out the darkness more than most people, maybe.
Surely, music entered my life as medication.
Mm, yes.
Uh, as something that changed my feelings, and it still does. You
Yeah.
know, and drugs let me down, but Led Zeppelin never has.
I'm going to quote you on that. That's amazing. Well, cool. So what is on the horizon for you just to kind of take us out into 2021? What do you see yourself moving towards? I know with the pandemic looming over us, it's hard to say, but what
Well,
kind of projects?
I booked a time to make another album with Mario Caldato Jr. He's best known for his work with the Beastie Boys in the
Yeah.
90s. He did the both Ghost of Rooms, the EP, and then the album that's come out in March.
Okay.
What thing is Ghost of Room 2 came out before Ghost of Room 1.
Oh,
And
okay.
I just absolutely love that. But I time me and Scrap to work with him in June. And we're like, we just want to be ready, and we think there's going to be a vaccine. And, if
Yeah.
not, it's a bummer and we'll have to like postpone. But
Yeah.
we're ready to work, man. We are. I can't even tell you.
Well, I know you'll keep creating no matter what, for sure. You're a very resilient artist, as I said, and Memphis is certainly lucky to have you. I wish we could write, but I feel like it's just it doesn't feel safe, especially yeah,
Yeah.
next time after the vaccine. So. Oh, one more thing. I create a curated Spotify playlist for every artist that I talk to that goes through kind of your life and your discography. Is there one that already exists, or do you need me? Is there a way that I can kind of
I
dig?
would, if you cooked one up.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I would just love that. I mean, there's a couple of playlists out there that are pretty good, but there's people that are sort of focused on the haughty melodic period, people that are focused on soul coughing, people that are focused on like kind of the weird stuff I've done lately.
Okay.
So like a full career spanning one, I should do one of those days. one of these.
Doing it because that's what people are loving that for sure, to get to know you. So
yeah, well, I do appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's all my questions. I think this is going to be a really inspiring episode for a lot of artists. So thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Our song is the theme song of the whole podcast. I don't know if you knew. It's Ain't Coming Home. So you'll hear it. Once I edit it, I'll send it to you. So
yeah, please.
Well, that's a wrap, y'all. To see our full conversation, you can go to youtube.com/Grace Askew. You can also go to the Grace Askew Spotify page to enjoy a fully curated playlist for each week's episode. And y'all, don't be scared to slide on into my DMs on Instagram with any questions, comments, or insights you'd like to share. Thanks for listening to Daring to Suck. I'll see y'all next Monday for another fresh episode.